The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Christmas Predictions, Stories of St. John Bosco's Prophetism. On Saturday, December 20th, 1862, at the Good Night Talk, Don Bosco said these exact words: "By Christmas, one of us will go to heaven." Since no one was sick, each looked rather uneasily after his own affairs. Sunday, December 21st, passed uneventfully. No one was in the infirmary. On December 22nd, after Christmas Novena services, Joseph Blangino, a fine 10-year-old lad, took sick and went to the infirmary. Within a few hours, his condition became critical and he was given up by the doctor. The evening of December 23rd, Blangino received Holy Viaticum. At about 10, Don Bosco was in the infirmary talking with Father Rua about the boy's condition. "If you wish, I'll willingly sit up with him through the night," Father Rua said. "It won't be necessary," Don Bosco replied. "There will be no danger until 2 in the morning. Go to bed now, but have someone call you at 2. You'll be needed then." In fact, at that hour, Father Rua administered the anointing of the sick to the boy. At 2:30, Blangino died. The next morning, Don Bosco revealed that he had dreamed of the dying boy that very night. "I dreamed that Father Alessonati and my mother, who has been dead these last 6 years, were nursing Blangino. Father Alessonati was praying on his knees. My mother was smoothing up the bed, and I was sitting nearby. As she got close to the boy, she exclaimed, 'He's dead!' 'What time is it?' I asked. 'Almost 3, I was told." "Would that all our boys could die so tranquilly," Father Alessonati remarked. That's when I awoke. Immediately I heard a very loud banging on the sidewalk, as with a board. "Blangino is now on his way to eternity," I cried out. I opened my eyes to see if dawn had arisen, but saw nothing. Certain of the youngster's death, I recited the De Profundis. The clock struck 2:30. At the Christmas midnight mass, a very large number of boys received communion and prayed for the repose of Blangino's soul. As always on such occasions, the boys felt closer to Don Bosco. On December 28th, one came up to him. "Will you please give me some advice?" he asked. "On what?" Don Bosco replied with a smile. "On my soul." "Well then, for 3.5 years you've lived in mortal sin." "It can't be. I regularly go to confession to Father Savio." "Well then listen." And Don Bosco named some 50 sins that the boy had always concealed. As each was mentioned, the youngster had to admit that it was true and promised to make a good confession. Something even more extraordinary took place toward the end of 1862. As in Blangino's case, there were over 600 witnesses. Albert, a strapping 16-year-old student, had taken a turn for the worse through the evil influence of Felix, a schoolmate of his native town. As was always the case in such instances, Albert shunned Don Bosco as much as he could. The latter sent for him several times, but Albert always balked. Finally, one November day, as he was rushing down the stairs, he found himself face to face with Don Bosco and blushed red as a beet. "Albert, why do you keep running away from me?" Don Bosco asked, gripping his hand. "Don Bosco wants to help you. You must make a good confession as soon as possible." The boy pursed his lips. "You refuse?" Don Bosco went on, "The time will come when you'll ask for me and won't find me. Think it over seriously." At the Good Night Talk on Monday, December 1st, Don Bosco urged the boys to make well the exercise for a happy death, because one of them would die before he could make another. "He is right here among you," Don Bosco said, "but I can never get to him because he always steers clear of me. I have tried to speak to him of his soul, but to no avail, and yet one day he will call for me, and I won't be around. In his last moments, he'll cry out for Don Bosco, but Don Bosco won't be found. He will yearn for him, but in vain, because Don Bosco will be away, and he will die without ever seeing him again. I would very much like to talk to him, to help him straighten out within the short time left to him, but he keeps dodging me. Still, I'll secretly put a guardian angel at his side to lead him to me. He doesn't know and doesn't want to know that he is doomed to die shortly. He doesn't want to die, but it has been irrevocably so decreed. We shall prepare him. We shall remind him. The feasts of the Immaculate Conception and Christmas are propitious occasions. Let's hope that one of them may draw him to a good confession. But let him bear in mind that he will not be here for the next exercise for a happy death. The next day, the whole oratory was astir with this stunning prediction. Meanwhile, Don Bosco told the infirmarian, a student himself, to look after him prudently and try to persuade him to receive the sacraments, especially to go to confession as soon as possible, since time was running out. Kufia, the infirmarian, understood and strove to be a guardian angel, but his efforts failed. Notwithstanding Don Bosco's frightening prediction, Albert wasn't troubled. His thinking went somewhat like this. Don Bosco has the reputation of being a prophet. He said that someone would lead the doomed boy to him and that he would warn him. But I won't let myself be caught, he thought. Since he won't be able to warn me, I can't be the one he's talking about. His unfortunate ruse succeeded all too well. Through that entire month, not once could Don Bosco even get a glimpse of him. The feasts of the Immaculate Conception and Christmas came and went, and Albert never even thought of mending his ways or going to confession. According to the oratory's time-honored custom, the exercise for a happy death was scheduled for New Year's Day. Don Bosco was on the alert for a chance to be with Albert, at least in his last moments. Unfortunately, at this very time, Duchess Montmorency invited him to her property and residence to preach the 40 hours devotion after Christmas. When Don Bosco resisted, she insisted with vehemence. She was a benefactress of the oratory, after all. I shall come, Don Bosco resignedly replied. When the time came, Don Bosco sent for Oriella and Father Alessonati. I'll be away for 3 days, he told them. Is it all right? Is anybody sick? Have no worry, everything's fine. The infirmary is empty. And so, Don Bosco left. Albert was in excellent health and in high spirits. In the dormitory, he was handed a letter from a certain Moisio, a friend of his who had left the oratory the year before to enter the diocesan seminary. Are you alive or dead? His friend asked. If you're alive, why don't you write? I'm going to write to him that I'm dead, Albert remarked after reading the letter to his companions. So he did, to the great amusement of all, and mailed the letter. The rest of the day went by uneventfully. Like everybody else, Albert took part in the weekly walk. Later, he went to supper and then to choir practice. When the bell rang for night prayers, he too went along. But toward the end of the prayers, he suddenly felt weak and close to fainting. Felix, a schoolmate, propped him up and with another boy helped him to the infirmary. No sooner was he in bed than excruciating stomach pains set in, and his throat began to swell. The doctor was sent for and did all that he could, but he soon realized that the case was very serious and that the patient should receive the last sacraments without delay. The infirmarian broke the news to Albert. Sensing his critical condition, the poor boy, grieved by his bad conduct, asked to make his confession. Shall I call Father Alessonati? The infirmarian suggested. No, Albert replied. I want Don Bosco. He was greatly dismayed when he was told that Don Bosco was out. Back into his mind flashed Don Bosco's words a month before. I'm lost, he cried. I'll die without ever seeing Don Bosco again. I always kept away from him because I didn't want to talk to him, and now God is punishing me. He then asked for another priest. Felix ran to fetch Father Rua, who came at once. Albert made his confession with true sorrow. Father Alessonati, too, informed of the boy's critical condition, hastened to his bedside. Finally, at peace with God, Albert turned to his two superiors. Tell Don Bosco I'm sorry. Tell him that though I don't deserve his pardon, I hope he will forgive me, just as I hope God has forgiven me. I'm truly sorry. I ask pardon of everybody. Toward 11:30, he edifyingly received Holy Viaticum, the anointing of the sick, and the papal blessing. Meanwhile, Felix, who had done his utmost to be helpful, stood in the corridor, looking in once in a while. Albert spotted him. "Come in, Felix," he called. Felix stepped to the foot of his bed. "It's your fault if I die without seeing Don Bosco," Albert went on reproachfully. "But I forgive you, because I too need God's pardon. You know who's responsible for my becoming bad. But no more of that. You'll see my father and mother. Tell them that I repented before dying, and that I'll be waiting for them in heaven. But you, it's because of you that Don Bosco isn't here now to comfort me." Deathly pale, Felix couldn't utter a word. Albert died around 3 o'clock on the morning of January 1st, 1863. That same day, his friend, Moisio, back in Casale, received Albert's letter with the message, "I am dead." Thank you for watching, and I do hope you all have a very blessed and joyful Advent this year. I recommend the St. Andrew's Novena all the way up until Christmas. Oh, and if you'd like to see my magnum opus about St. John Bosco, which is a summary of his whole life, just click on the link above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.